Okay, let's get into some, excuse me, some feedback effects on goals. We've hit on a couple of these already. So again, we have these tote or negative feedback loops, and this, as we've talked about, goes through how we have goals and then we have comparisons to our goals, right? To see if we are meeting our goals and not. And so goes over how when we get feedback on our goals, right, we then take that feedback and that helps us determine whether we are meeting our goals or not. And if we aren't, we need to go through this again, put in some more effort. What we haven't talked about, though, is the possibility of just changing goals as opposed to effort. So, with control theory, right, this gets into how much effort we put in response to various feedback, like positive or negative feedback. So, with negative feedback, as we've talked about, right, if we're keeping this same goal, this is the goal that we want. When we get negative feedback, then we either need to maintain our effort and keep striving for that goal, or we might even need to, change a strategy, increase our effort in order to reach this goal. First is with aspiration theory. This now gets at changing the goal as opposed to that effort. So with control theory as well, right? With positive feedback, then and we're maintaining our goal, then we are either maintaining or reducing effort towards that goal altogether, right? Because we feel like we may have reached or succeeded in getting to that goal based on feedback. So therefore, that same effort might not be needed. But we see some different things with aspiration theory. So we see with negative feedback here, when we're talking about changing the goal potentially, we might either make the goal a little bit easier or we might quit the goal altogether. And then effort wise, that has an opposing effect to control theory, right? Because then we either maintain or reduce our effort as opposed to maintain or increase. Similarly, in terms of contrasting effort results here relative to control theory, when we get some positive feedback on a goal, we might not decide that, okay, I don't need to put any effort into this anymore because I met it. We might decide that, hey, my goal was too easy. This was too easy of a goal, and I can make this goal more challenging and then accomplish more. And so in this case, we'd increase the level of our goal, and then we'd actually either maintain or increase the effort that we're putting into reaching this goal. So yeah, overall, in terms of um, effects on effort, right, we see pretty opposing things based on whether we are maintaining our goal and changing effort versus aspiration level, whether we're changing that, whether we're changing our goal, and then that has different influences on the effort. So let's go through a few examples here. This is just pointing out that both goals and feedback on those goals is important. So typically if you succeeded in your original goal pretty easily, you might have this idea to increase your goal difficulty. However, generally what we see is that we are most likely to increase our effort on something when we are not reaching our goals. But what we need both goals and we also need feedback. We need both to be able to make those tote loop comparisons, right? In order to decipher, okay, what am I meeting my goal or am I not? I have my goal, I know what that is now. What is my feedback telling me about whether this goal is being reached or not? So just what we see is that it's the combination of goals and feedback that more consistently leads to increases in effortful performance. This is kind of an interesting study or application of this here. So conversely to what we were just talking about, we see a coasting effect that occurs after success. So we after a success might be more likely to either reduce our effort or disengage completely. And so the interesting application here is this study by Ms. Rucci, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. What was found was that when controlling for obviously important variables such as strength of teams and home court advantage, NBA teams that won their last games were less likely to win the next ones. So I just think that's really interesting study and result there, and it gets at this idea that after we have a success in goal striving, so we just got to win, and maybe our overall goal is to reach a championship, and since we just got to win, that makes us feel better about our odds of reaching that overarching goal. We don't feel quite as much need to put effort in, so we see this coasting effect and being less likely to win the next game. Okay, this is an interesting academic goal study. So this gets at more of the level of aspirations. And so what we see here is it's a study on changing grade goals based on either success or failure. And so this sees high school students at various points of the year. So time 1, time 2, through time 4 and time 5, beginning of the semester here, end of the semester here, or end of the year, sorry. And so what we see is what we talked about with more of that aspiration level theory, right? Where goals were changed more frequently after a success. And the idea is that students were like, okay, my original grade goal here is probably too easy, so I'm going to change that and make it harder. There is the exception of this last spot, but it doesn't really make sense to completely change your goals at the end of the year, right? Because most of the points and everything are accounted for. So that just wouldn't really make too much sense. But yeah, anyways, again, more likely to change, and change in this scenario means raising the grade goal after success relative to failure. So not just changing the effort, right? Also getting at changing the goal here, or the level of aspiration. Interestingly, and finally here for this section, last slide, we can also make social comparisons, and we see very similar results here with these social comparisons. So there are two main types of social comparisons we can make, right? So we have upward comparisons, where we are comparing ourselves to someone else who's maybe higher up status wise, or however you're defining status with the task at hand here, who's objectively doing better with whatever, or subjectively just doing better socially with whatever the task is here. That would be an upward comparison, versus a downward comparison would be the exact opposite. Someone who is perceived to be a little bit lower on the pole for whatever this goal is. And basically, we see that when we are making upward social comparisons, this can make us feel bad, and getting at what control theory says, right? This shows us we might not be reaching our goal, and so therefore we see an increase in pushing towards goals here for as we get more and more towards upward comparisons. With downward comparisons, this makes us feel better, and therefore, kind of just adding on to that NBA study mentioned earlier, you can see things like coasting here, because we feel like, okay, I am likely reaching my goal here, right? And so I don't feel like I need to try as hard, and I'll be more likely to coast with this downward comparison relative to an upward comparison. Interestingly, going more towards that aspiration level aspect of things, right? We see that when we are making extreme upward comparisons, I mean, sure, we are more likely to keep pushing when we maintain goals, but we're also more likely to disengage from our goals, or quit them when we're doing these extreme upward comparisons. Maybe we just don't think that this goal makes sense anymore. So instead of putting in more effort for something, maybe we don't think we can reach it, then we disengage, quit from that goal, and try to, get at finding a different goal that's maybe better for us. And all right, that's it for goal feedback. We'll get into our last video on goals in this next one, which will just be strategies for goal setting, as well as some limitations of goals.